Hey, She Slayers, and welcome to another episode of She Slays the Day podcast. I am your host, Dr. Lauryn Brunswick, and today we have money talk. We really float through, if you haven't picked up a theme here, that's because it's a lifestyle podcast and I have ADHD, so we talk about whatever I want. But in reality, I would say that all my goal when I am like talking to my VAs about looking for guests, vetting guests, is or if you're listening and you're like, I really wish I could be a guest. Oh my God, by the way, hold on, come back to that. I just did a female voice. There's so many thoughts going through my head, you guys. So I had to, right before I got on here, I had to look at my brand pitch deck. So I have a pitch deck, which is a slide deck to pitch to brands. Okay. It's about you and the strengths of your audience, your outreach, blah, 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 your approach to marketing. And I always do it to update numbers because at any point they could like ask for the receipts and you don't want to be caught with your pants down around your ankles. I think that's the right phrase. And we are 60-40 women, y'all, 40% men. What? We slay the day, everybody. Oh, men are here. You're still a minority, but not really. Like, that's crazy. That is crazy. What was I talking about before that? There was no way. I think we all know there was no chance that I was going to remember what I was talking about. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay. So we were talking about the three different like categories that I put topics through. So it's 3 Bs: bored, broke, and burnt out. I find that a lot of us, especially this like millennial generation, even though we are 18%, 45 to 54, I know that because of the pitch deck, that these like, I don't know, just like one thing doesn't seem to like catch us and fulfill us. And so boredom really is like, I don't know. I am looking for somebody to come on and talk about taxidermy. If you've been following for a while, I listened to an ologies a long time ago. I became a little obsessed. This is in like my plans for when I just need a hobby. But any Enneagram 3 knows I will start charging for it and selling my stuff on Etsy or whatever, because nothing can be a hobby. It has to also turn into a revenue stream. So we've got boredom. We've got broke. So that's where this one fills in, or this fits in. We're talking about money today. And then burnt out. This is where we talk about systems, procedures, leadership techniques. We could also talk about adrenal glands and ice baths and all that kind of stuff. So really, I kind of picked 3 topics that allow me to talk about anything, but there is a system to my madness. So today's a money one. Funny, quick story. I'll keep it quick and then we'll jump in. Okay. So right now I am, if you've been paying attention, which you of course have. So last week I launched Beyond Brick and Mortar, which is my first membership I've ever done. I have Multi-Passionate Carpreneur, which is a 10-week intensive course that runs in Q1. But Beyond Brick and Mortar is a monthly membership where I'm helping healthcare professionals launch personal brands. And like, it was a crazy, huge, awesome thing. Like 50 people signed on, way more than I thought. So I had to like close it down because I have to focus on creating a great experience for them and making sure that they're getting the transformation that is promised. So I am doing a ton of research. Like, I have my personal experience, obviously in personal brand, but as I'm building out the modules, I need to make sure that it's not just like my experience. And so I've been doing a ton of research. As people are coming in, I'm asking them about their niche, and I'm really figuring out that like, okay, people need help with this. People unknowingly have no idea how to pick a sexy niche. And so yesterday was a snow day, and my 10-year-old, I'm working literally on creating the training module on niche and niche. I don't know. I want to sound fancy. So I'll say niche until I have to use the catchphrase, the riches are in the niches, and then I'll switch the way I pronounce it. But she comes in and she's been wanting to do a YouTube channel for a while. Like, okay, like my husband and I are very protective parents. So it's like, we'll see about that. But she's been talking about it. and it's a snow day and it's going to be creative and get her off Minecraft. So we're like, all right. So I'm working with her on what her YouTube channel is because, of course, I can't just let her do any YouTube channel. If she's going to do a YouTube channel, she needs to like have a direction and like it needs to have a strong storyline, right? Like, no, I can't just be a normal parent and let her do whatever she wants. So she comes in and she's like, I think because we've been talking about this YouTube channel for a while. And so I run her through an exercise where I'm like, okay, write down everything you're interested in, write down every like struggle you've overcome, like write down things that people like to talk about, and then look for like the weave. Okay. I explained it a little different to a fourth grader, obviously. And she comes back and she's like, all right, I want to do baking. And I'm like, baking. Interesting. You don't really bake that often. Why did you pick baking? And she's like, well, and she like has some dumb fourth grader explanation. And I'm like, okay, this could work. And I'm like, but what's going to be unique about your baking show compared to other kids? So then she's like, well, some people have allergies. And I was like, well, so right now, Ty has, we took her to a functional medicine doc. She's got a terrible microbiome. It stems back to the fact that she had IV antibiotics when she was 9 days old because she had a staph infection, even though we did a home birth, did everything, air quotes, right, but whatever. So her gut, shocking, is trashed from these life-saving IV antibiotics. Okay. So we're working with a functional medicine doc, and the doc is very like focused on array of colors. Okay. And like there's everything is like fruits, vegetables, but also things like cinnamon, clove, garlic, chickpeas, like all these things she gets like points for. Okay. So like onion is white, and so she's supposed to get like 15 different colors a day. And the functional med doc is pushing. So like for instance, she would rather have her have a single carrot, a single piece of broccoli, and a single piece of cauliflower, because that's 3 colors, instead of, a whole cup of one individual thing like broccoli. So the diversity, the rainbow. And so I'm trying to gently lead her towards like, I'm like, well, what is something you've overcome? Like, what about, and she's like, well, I don't really want to talk about my stomach aches. I'm like, well, you don't have to get like super vulnerable and this or that. And so I'm just like trying to shape this fourth grader who just wants to do this YouTube channel. But I'm like, oh, this could be good. You could test out like popular recipes, from other bloggers that have like good followings, because you're like cross collabing, like, hey, I reviewed your recipe and I said it was really great and kid friendly and I scored at this, and or like I put this twist on it, like so her first one was guacamole. And so one of the things that our family does to like beef up guacamole, it really doesn't have the colors thing, but this could be, in her storyline, is we will chop up cucumber, like dice it and throw it into the guacamole. It really makes it like fresh. It bulks it up too. So this is really nice. Like if you're having a party, and you don't need 15 avocados or, whatever, it's great. You should try it sometime. Well, and that it would get another point in the guacamole. You don't just have the avocados, you also have all this other stuff. And so, yeah, so she does it. It's great. But the whole time I'm like still trying to like connect with her, like, no. So your storyline is that you have these stomach aches. And so you're trying these kid friendly recipes and trying to sneak in colors. And she's like, okay. And she just wants to edit and do that stuff. So I don't know. I guess it really wasn't that funny of a story, but it seemed funny while it was happening. That like coincidental, I guess, is more the thing, and how I just can't let my kids be kids. Yeah, it's not funny. Okay, well, anyways, let's talk about our guest today. So today we have Antonio Vaglica, and if you went to Cairo WealthCon and you're like, that sounds familiar, yes, he was there. So he is an ex-MLB prospect turned serial entrepreneur that owns a portfolio of companies designed to help service-based business owners optimize their businesses and save money in taxes. Woo woo. Sound fun? Yeah, right? I agree. So let us take a breath, center ourselves. Dear God, this prayer, for some reason, I am feeling directly called to talk to people who have maybe just need to go outside, like maybe just need to put their screen down for a minute and go outside and let their feet, if they're not in the winter, feel some grass, to feel the sun on their face, to soak up those electrons, to, if they're by water, to see water, to just get back into that habit of grounding as we are approaching spring. Just remind us how you didn't design us this way, to be in front of a screen, to be indoors. Like, this was not a part of your plan. Well, I mean, obviously everything's a part of your plan. Sorry, God, I didn't mean to offend you there. But we were designed to be in nature. And so for anyone today who needs to be reminded, like if you are inside, going outside for little like 5-minute bursts throughout the day, getting different types of sunlight, sunrise, midday, sunset, all of those completely do something different for your circadian rhythms and your mental health. So let this just be your reminder to go connect, take a breath, maybe go for a walk outside and listen to the podcast, and just function how you were designed to function. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, without further ado, here is my conversation with Antonio Vaglica. Enjoy. Okay, well, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
So you and I got to meet briefly at Cairo WealthCon. Thanks for, now you don't live in Miami, right? You lived there briefly?
I lived in Miami briefly, but I live in Tampa. Is this supposed to be recording, by the way?
It is.
Got it. Is it recording? Okay, I don't,
It
okay,
says
cool.
It's recording.
Does it?
Thanks for double checking, though. That would have
all good. Sorry about that.
No. Okay, so you just moved to Tampa. That's not too far.
Yeah, I moved to Miami in 2022, living in New York for a while. As you can see, I'm on my grandfather's terrace in New York. It's actually freezing out right now. But so the reason why I moved from New York was simply because I started to, really hit like critical mass in my business, and we were really starting to grow. And living in your grandfather's basement, which it sounds worse than it was. I had like a really sick, like tricked out basement.
It was a sweet.
You
can tell that you've had to rehearse this line at the bar. I swear.
but like when we started to hit like solid business traction, I was, candidly just starting to make too much money to the point where I needed to go get uncomfortable, because everyone around me was just like, telling me to settle for complacency. And for me, the access to mediocrity is actually scarier than being broke. So I needed to go take more risks. So I moved to Miami with a friend. I knew no one else there. Really just started to build our sales organization while I was in Miami, and was taking, 15, 16 sales calls a day. Didn't really make many friends, just basically worked out and took sales calls. That was all I did. And Miami, I couldn't really find my tribe. Really awesome place, just not really for me. And I sold that business, which we're more than happy to talk about, and moved to Miami to go launch our new business. And we built an office in Orlando. Then now we're building another office in Tampa. So I moved to Tampa last year, and that'll be the destination for a while, for sure.
So when you say you left because you needed to get uncomfortable, I understand what you're talking about. So like, because I think you mentioned on Stephanie Wigner's podcast, you were like living the good life on $3,000 a month, or, like, so basically what I'm understanding is you were making good enough money and you could have seen yourself just settling for that. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and like I'm open about numbers. So like I was 21 years old, making $400,000 a year of income and living off of like lavishly off $3,000 a month. Like my dad's good friend was a butcher, and all I needed was steaks, so I was able to get steaks for free. And I was living rent free at my grandfather's house. So like life was great, but I wasn't pushed. And my biggest fear in life is not maximizing my potential. And so I'd rather just, go for the risk and never like wonder what if that makes sense.
Okay. So no, when you said 3,000 a month, I was like, wait, so were you making like 40,000 a year? And you want, no, 400,000 a year. Okay. And so you moved to Miami, and it really wasn't because you were like, oh, I'm going to go live this like big broy life in Miami.
I didn't go out to a club or drinking one time the whole time I was there. Didn't buy a cool car. That's where Miami wasn't really for me, because it feels like you sometimes at least the culture that I was, young and growing business owner, a lot of people are just trying to keep up with the Joneses. And
Mm-hmm.
when you start to go down the path of really understanding how business works, you realize that a lot of people are overextending themselves with debt to make themselves look like they're making more money than they are. And I want to build true wealth, not just wealth to show off to people.
That really is that reminds me of, I told you we just got back from Japan, and one of the things I was not prepared for was how many luxury stores are everywhere in Japan. So like in just their airport, they're just their normal airport. There was a Cartier, a Gucci, a Prada, a Chanel. I probably saw 10 different Chanel stores while I was there. Like it's just like everywhere. And my husband and I were having a conversation. I'm like, okay, so is Japan just insanely rich? And he's like, they're probably just overextending themselves. Yes, but also like probably just overextending themselves. And I don't think that people realize how much that keeping up with the Joneses is a real thing that is
Yep.
happening.
We're really trying to borrow everyone else's interpretation of like what success means to us. And I really think entrepreneurship just in general is like doing enough personal development to the point where you find out what success means to you. And
Mhm.
really understanding that ultimately everything you need is exactly right here, right now. And
Right.
it's really about like peeling back the layers and going more internal. And money ends up just being a barometer to get into cooler rooms with people who are making more impact. That's at least the way that I see it.
Yeah, that's a huge benefit of it. When you're using it, like that is the good side of it. Like I think that so many people, I saw something that I was going to say an article. It was a reel. Okay. It was a TikTok.
Same thing at
But
this
no,
point.
it
It's
was
basically
talking
like
about,
reading the newspaper.
I was reading an article. No, and it was talking about how like this just the different stages of wealth that a lot of people go through. And it talked about how so many people one, you get stuck at this like upper middle class, you know, just because people are wondering. I'm sure it's probably like that, like 70,000 to 200,000, right? Like you're comfortable, you're not stressing out too much about your groceries and things like that, but you're surrounded by that, and so you're working hard, but like it's not that like next level hustle. Then there's that next level hustle where you start to live a little more luxuriously, and that level is where people are really looking still to others for that validation, that like, did I make it? Am I rich yet? Like, am I rich yet? And all this signaling. And then the third level is where people are talking about like investments and like, no, we're choosing not to afford that trip to Bali this year because we're maxing out this and we're doing, like we're working on this, and like just kind of thinking through those different levels of financial intelligence is maybe a better way to put it.
Yeah, yeah, or like maturity as well. Like I feel I
Mhm.
get that way all the time of just like, hey, I want people to know like how well we're doing and I want to be able to buy these things. And sometimes I do. Like I sometimes splurge a little bit on watches and nice things like that. And I think where a lot of people sometimes go wrong is combating that with shame instead of using that as a as an opportunity to learn a lesson or just get around people that have better core values or so to where like you don't
Mhm.
feel like you have to purchase something just to get validation from someone else. But we all have to just be very blunt and honest with each other of like, hey, we all experience this. Let's figure out a way to use this egoic way of how we think about money. Just, I mean, I feel like it's like an American culture thing
Mhm.
of how can we use it to benefit good? Because I think it's not about people being too wealthy. It's about we need more wealthy good people. Because
Yes.
if I put more wealth inside of Dr. Lauryn's hands and in your net worth, you're going to impact the world so much more positively. So you
Mhm.
have an obligation to actually make more money if we start thinking about it that way.
Right. Yeah. So I've heard you say that you grew up very upper middle class, like very comfortable. Was was there any lessons that you had to learn? Like how did you learn to care about like really working hard? Because this is one of the things that we see like across society is like kids that grow up comfortable. can not necessarily follow, like, even though they're watching their parents. Were your parents entrepreneurs or?
Yeah, so my dad owned a construction company for a very
Okay.
long time. He's going on 30 years now. Him and my brother own it now today, and they do quite well. But it was always like this very blue collar mentality where it's like, hey, we make money and then we spend the money.
Okay.
And we sure did, like they sure did spend the money, and we lived a very lavish lifestyle. But you grew up thinking that you're rich when you didn't understand, like, hey, maybe you might be rich, but there's no wealth being created whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that I was able to ground myself and kind of get away from that, because I was desensitized to money very early on, just very
What do you
bluntly.
mean?
Like my family, I came from a family of like blue collar New York guys, gamblers. That would always just be like our version of like family outings was like bringing everyone over to the house to gamble and play poker and all these different
Mhm.
things. So you start getting desensitized to all these dollar amounts being thrown around.
Yep.
And so my way of being grounded and understanding like that you need to work hard and create a lot of discipline was sports. I was a Division I college baseball player. It's literally all I cared about doing. I missed every single family outing, all vacations, everything, just to sacrifice the dream of playing professional baseball. Went to a boarding school in North Carolina, all these different things. And I realized like my biggest like kick in the ass moment, excuse my language, was when my college career ended. And I was most definitely good enough to get to the next level, but I was not manifesting myself into being an elite athlete. I was good enough with being good enough. And I was the hardest worker on my team until you realize that everyone that's going to make it to the elite level is always the hardest worker on their team.
Right.
So I wasn't surrounding myself with enough people to get to that next level because I was okay with my ego being fed of being the best player on the team or in the best player in the
Mhm.
state. At one point, I was the best player in the region, but who cares at the end of the day if you're not willing to continue to push yourself? So when baseball ended for me, that was like this look in the mirror moment of like, hey, you're talented, but if you're not going to support that talent with since like severe consistency and discipline, it's not going to get you to where you want to be.
Do you know your Enneagram type?
No,
The
that's
number.
the numbers, right? I think it's
Yep.
a 4, and everyone like looks at
What?
me odd when I say it's a 4. I'm gonna have to retake it for
You
sure.
can't be a 4. If everybody looks at you odd like you're a 4, every 4 just feels offended. Okay, 4s, you can be successful also. They just tend to be more the artist. So, well, where I was wondering is if you have this instinctual drive for achievement, because I feel like just because you are raising children, like, so I'm an entrepreneur, super hardworking. My kids, they're not necessarily just because they're seeing my husband and I work and hustle and like have grit and discipline. That's not necessarily something they're going to absorb by proxy. Now, some kids will, like some kids, like, but every parent hopes that's what's going to happen. But like, I guess I was wondering, like, do you feel like you had to overcome anything of like relearning? Like, my kids just don't want for anything. And if you don't want for anything, what can happen to a lot of kids is they don't really try hard. Like
Yeah. So I can't speak for like maybe for my future children. I don't have children, so
Mhm.
I'll speak for myself and my experience. I'm one of those like sick, weird people where winning is more fun than fun is fun for
Yeah,
me.
you're a 3.
Uh,
You're
like,
not a 4, honey.
so like that's really truly at the core of it. All I care about is like winning in a healthy way.
Mhm.
Sometimes it could be toxic in terms of like
Well, a
the
lot of times if you're competitive, most people think that competitive people are like constantly wanting others to lose. Most of the time, competitive people, that's one of my biggest strengths, is I'm competitive with myself.
Yep,
Like,
100%. And I also mix competitive with collaboration at the same time so that we can
mm,
compete together. It's never competing against you. I'm always competing with you. And if you want to just compete against me, great. I don't view that competition. It's all good. There's enough market share in entrepreneurship to win together.
right.
And like you'll be eventually miserable if you don't want to collaborate or at least, acknowledge the fact that we're like I'm not Amazon against Walmart right now,
Yep.
maybe one day. So
Right. Okay, so like I'm kind of tying, maybe my brain is just working slow on jet lag, but like the pieces are really falling together as far as like a couple things you've said a couple times with this like, so you are self-competing, you're wanting to surround yourself with better people because like, yeah, if you have a competitive, like, so a lot of times competitive and comparative, a lot of, will go along in a healthy way. And you could have been the richest of your friends. like the best. That was the top of the mountaintop, because if you just looked around, you know, like that circle of like the 5 people you surround yourself with, but you saw like, okay, I need to surround myself with people doing more, make yourself uncomfortable. How did you start to get in those circles? Like, do you just walk into the Ritz and be like, does anybody want to be my friend?
So I actually dialed it down to a formula that I'm gonna do
Hell
a
yeah.
keynote about it on Thursday. And it's a 5-step formula. And the first step, and this is the formula, in my opinion, on how to reverse engineer any outcome that you ever want. And it parlays into business pretty well. Number one is making yourself valuable. That is the number one thing that I think you should always focus on, is like, how do I become someone that's referable, or somebody that other people want to be around in the first place? So making yourself valuable, that's through consistency in the micro habits for me. So I use a system that I coined Build. So if you're looking at like, how do I make myself more valuable? How do I radically personally develop? Try not to take on the entire 1-year goal in one day. Dial it down to a micro set of habits that you can consistently win, to where logic, math, and science tells you that it's virtually guaranteed. So for me, I use a system called Build. B stands for body. So what am I doing for my body every day? U stands for you. What is it that I truly want to do? Because ultimately, I'm building an entire life around what I want to do. So if I don't schedule that time in, I'm eventually going to lose myself. I stands for income. What am I doing? Am I making the sales calls? Am I, closing any deals, etc.? L stands for love or relationships. How am I deepening my relationships? How am I building new ones? And then D stands for your development. What are my inputs? What am I consuming? My books, podcasts, all these types of things. And if I simply just take care of those things, even if I don't have the desire to do them every day, because you're not going to, logic, math, and science tells you that you are guaranteed to achieve the outcome over a long enough period of time. So that's what I started to buy into. Then I parlayed that with creating my own ecosystem. That was step number 2. And that ecosystem all started for me 5 years ago with a podcast. Since then, we've done 500 episodes, me and my business partner, Landon. And initially, we set out that podcast because we were two 22-year-olds, like identity lost, just out of college sports, didn't know what we wanted to do. We got into the world of financial services and self-employment, and we wanted to share our story. And we quickly realized that no one wanted to hear about two 22-year-olds talk about success when we have none of it. So we pivoted the model.
Did that happen around episode 6, by the way, where you're like,
it was like episode 2.
Shit, what should we talk about next week? We've already said our story.
Pretty much. And so we flipped it on its head and started to get successful people like yourself on the podcast and learn from your story and how you did it, because selfishly, we couldn't afford your mentorship at the time.
Oh, so yeah. The amount of conversations that you get for free by being a podcast host, it's wonderful.
It's the best thing in the world. And it's what I really like about a podcast is that I'm naturally introverted. I'll be extroverted when I have to be. I'm an outgoing introvert, I consider myself. So I love speaking on stages. I love networking, but I have a very low social battery. And so with the podcast, I'm never trying to go to a networking event where a lot of people see them as like icky, like everyone's just trying to sell each other on things. Not the ones that you guys host, granted, because you host an incredible space. But there's like these sometimes these networking groups that like I just don't even want to go into. But when you go to these places, if you come off as someone that could just add value into someone's life instead of trying to force what you do upon people, the podcast is a really easy, low barrier to entry where you'll be able to get people in a conversation and have a shared experience with them a lot easier than trying to bring a value proposition immediately to them business-wise.
Right.
So that was our way of doing it. And we parlayed step 2 with step 1 by implementing the advice that these people were giving us. That's the number one key, right? It's like, I pay for mentorship, or I listen to people. I'm actually going to read what they tell me to read and listen to what they tell me to listen and all that stuff. Ultimately, that resulted in a ton of like joint ventures, affiliate partnerships, where we quit our jobs, started a sales agency, and even like 5 key joint ventures from the podcast were sending us thousands of leads a month to our sales agency. And so ultimately, like to answer your question directly, that was really how we kickstarted this thing, was with the podcast. And then eventually we took that ecosystem that we built. We started building communities, book clubs, all these different types of things, and then started to merge those ecosystems with other people. Because I'm no longer looking for one-to-one relationships. I'm looking for relationships that could go one to many. So instead of like, let's say I meet Lauryn, I'm no longer looking to say, hey, Lauryn, you should be a client. I'm going to say, hey, Lauryn, what's a mutually beneficial thing we can do to be value adds to each other's communities? Because now 1 + 1 equals significantly more. And that's been my formula. And then we just continue to deepen relationship capital. The way that I see relationships is simply like a bank account. Too many people, especially younger people, try and withdraw from an empty bank account. Hey, what's in it for me? When
Yes.
you just need to be authentically depositing into relationships. Over time, the laws of the universe just allow people to reciprocate. You're going to get burned 5 out of every 10 times, if not more. But the true relationships that stick are exponential, and they're exponentially better than the other ones that didn't. So it's a numbers game in that aspect, and all you have to do is focus on bringing value. And then step 5 is simply just to repeat. That's where
Oh,
most
wait,
people
shit.
miss it.
What were 3 and 4?
So one was to make yourself valuable. Two was
Yes.
to build your own ecosystem.
Yep.
3 was to merge those ecosystems.
Yep.
4 was to deepen relationship capital, and 5 is to simply just stay consistent in doing it.
Yep. Yeah, I feel like the making yourself valuable, so often when you see a new business starting, and they're like going to networking events, like networking is icky to them because they're going into it with a, what can you provide for me? What can you provide for me? What can you provide for me? Whereas, in the beginning, I'll just tell new docs, listen, you're seeing 4 people a week. But like you need to go in with like, I have hundreds of patients a week that I need to find resources for them. And so like when you're meeting someone, putting it to them first of being like, hey, tell me about you and what you do so I can like provide like link you to my patients. And then it just like opens up the door where they're like, oh, well, do you want to tell me about you too? But like, ew, like nobody wants to be like, hi, I opened up my doors. If you know anybody needing chiropractic, like send them to me. It's like every person who's been in business is like, yep, sounds good. We'll
Yeah.
totally do that. Like, oh yeah, I would love to go get coffee with you. No, you know,
That's the way that I see it is like overwhelm people with so much value to the point that they feel obligated to reciprocate. But never like I never ask. But if you are gonna ask, it's like the whole Gary Vee thing. It's like jab, 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 right hook.
Mhm.
Constantly deposit, deposit, deposit. And then it's such an organic way of asking people if they know other people that could potentially introduce you because they've been waiting to find ways to reciprocate because you deposited so much value.
Yes. Gary Vee, I love his advice because he also talks about like from a podcasting standpoint of like going from or like personal brand, like social media or podcasting into selling. He just like really talks about not gatekeeping your best stuff. Like so many people are like, oh, this is what I'll give away for free. But if you want my advice, you need to buy my course. And he just like blows that all up, being like, no, you're right. Deposit, deposit, like give it all away for, I don't remember if it was him or Rory Vaden. They work really closely together, who said like, do that for 3 years before you like even try and sell people your first thing, type of thing, where it's just like, because then they're like, oh, if this is the kind of information you give away for free on a podcast or on your social media, like, well, yes, what is your course like or things like that.
100%. Couldn't agree
Uh,
more.
okay, so when you went into like the bigger leagues, and then you're talking about wanting to make yourself valuable. Did you have this all of a sudden because you were the big fish in a small pond? I mean, even though
Yep.
New York, maybe your grandpa's basement, and now you're kind of the small fish in a big pond. So, you talk about how core values became really apparent to you there. And I've heard you talk about when you're consulting, you've even brought God into the equation with things. So, like, talk to me about how you kind of got through this. Like, I'm a small fish in this big pond. What feelings kind of happened there, and how you really settled into those core values of leading your future decisions?
Yeah, great question. I think a huge piece of finding out like who you are and what you want out of life is taking enough action to find out what you don't want. I think
Ooh,
everyone's sitting on the sidelines waiting to like say, "Hey, I'm trying to figure all this out. I'm trying to let it come to me." But in my opinion, the only way to find out what you actually want to do with your life is to take enough action to find enough things that you
what
don't
you
want to
don't
do
want.
to where
Yes.
it dials it down. And it's a biased perspective because I'm just like a radical action taker and I just like pound my fist of like you have to have urgency around it. But yeah, that was a huge shift for me, and I took enough action and went like when I was living in Miami. I know it was a hyper specific example, but I would go to dinners with all these people that I would see on Instagram, and I would like, run that formula that I just walk you through. And I was with some of the larger people that you would see on social media and stuff. And like the barometer of being able to be valuable at the table was like how much money you made a month or what car
Right.
you drove. And it's like, that's just not me. Like, let's talk about like relationships and God and where we're traveling, or tell me about like what you like to do, and let's go play some sports and stuff, all those types of things. Cause like ultimately, like we all run our own businesses to get to a point where we can hang out and break bread and talk about things that truly matter. Because all having money is to have access to resources to do cool things. That was a mindset shift for me of like, I don't even want to hang out with
But
these
you
people.
were like young and new. So if you weren't dousing yourself in a Gucci tracksuit, how did you prove your worth to be at that table? Because, like, yes, I get it from a sense of like, you shouldn't have to prove your worth to anyone except God, like, and
Yep.
guess what? You're already worthy. But like, in reality, the reality is that if you're sitting at a table with 20 other really high level entrepreneurs and business, like, you're 20 something. Like, how did you get across to them? Like, hey, I am someone that has knowledge of value.
I think I out personally developed a lot of people where it's like
That
where
was the
where I
pill.
can
Yep.
where I can't where I'll make up in not having results in numbers wise, I'll make up for it in bringing value intangibly at times as well.
Hmm.
At the time also, like I was like in severe fitness mode as well. So people ultimately, it might sound materialistic, but people respect you when you're in like elite shape as well,
No, that is
and
true.
you're
Yep.
taking care of yourself.
Hmm.
And then like when I was hanging out with these people for a long enough time, what they respected the most was the consistency. Because what you see, especially when you're in an environment like Miami, everyone is a great marketer and they're hopping from different offering to different offering. And I was just doing the same thing every single day, outlasting everyone. Because I knew for a fact, I was like, I'm gonna outlast. I'm not gonna make all the money today, but I'm gonna outlast everyone in business. And then the biggest catalyst for me was when I shifted business models to going from like this financial advising side to the consulting side of business, where we're truly running fractional family offices for multi-million dollar companies, if not nine-figure companies. I really understood how the best businesses work, and I started to like really understand business. And I don't claim to be an expert in business. There's still so much more to learn. But when you're around people that all they focused on is like, how do I run enough advertising to make enough money for myself and then to buy and obtain depreciating things, you're able to articulate a large amount of value because you know like the right things to say when it comes to truly running a sustainable business that can operate at the enterprise level, not just at the relationship level.
What is fractional family businesses?
So there's a concept called a family office that, let's say you're worth nine figures, you're worth $1 billion. You have this massive exit of your company. You have hundreds of millions of dollars. You now need a team of people literally dedicated all day to protect and preserve the family wealth, to pass it down to next generations, et cetera. So what these large families do is they create their own in-house family office, which is truly like on W-2 salary, accountants, advisors, bankers, lawyers, all these different financial professionals all working together just for this family to build the family wealth. We do that fractionally for because like that's going to cost you north of a half a million, $1 million a year to have that
Yeah,
team.
just in payroll. That's yeah.
So when you're a 7, 8 figure company, you can't afford $1 million a year payroll for
Mhm.
that, but you need all of those professionals in alignment for your benefit. And typically, if you're trying to piecemeal them all together, wondering if they have your best interest in mind, you're losing money by not focusing on more revenue generating activity.
And then you have to try since you're piecing it together, they're all these different companies. And so you're like, well, can you talk to this person? And like, oh, let me forward you that email that I got that they're asking for.
Exactly. So we do all of that for you. It's a full-on done for you fractional family office where a lot of it's vertically integrated, but like the people that we can't vertically integrate, we manage all of the meetings so that literally your only focus is to go make more money while we do all the shit behind the scenes. Excuse my language. But all the things that don't make you
F
money, but
bomb friendly
you
podcast.
need to really like focus on, like in terms of, you make a lot of money. I don't want to give 40% of it back to the government, but I also don't want to study tax law and make sure that I'm implementing all these things, but I need to have them implemented.
Right.
We be the nerd. We're all the nerds so that you could just focus on making more money, and we'll make sure that it translates to wealth.
Got it. Okay. So I would love for you to kind of walk me through the evolution of like, we'll say like the person going from a quarter of $1 million a year to 9 million, because like, so basically step one, they have a CPA, like they've graduated from, what is it, like tax, whatever, the free,
TurboTax.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, TurboTax. They have a CPA and they're like, I'm making enough money that I don't think so like, what's kind of that first person when somebody starts to go on this journey towards 9 million or 9 figures, $1 billion, that is really important to make sure you have on your team?
I would say making sure, like, number one, in my opinion, is making sure you have someone or that you understand how to do your books. Like a foundational level understanding of accounting is 100% necessary for all business owners. So, for example, even if you're going to delegate to a bookkeeper, which I highly recommend you do, it doesn't have to be some advanced thing. You could even use QuickBooks. You should definitely be alongside that professional for a little bit so that you truly know your numbers, so that you understand what your key revenue drivers are. Because there's two different types of dollars in your business. There's active revenue generating dollars, what's my sales teams, marketing efforts, things that make me more money. But based off how much money I'm collecting and how many more patients I'm bringing through the door, how much do I have to invest in revenue supporting dollars to make sure that I have enough benches or x-ray machines or staff or associates on staff to make sure that my clients are taken care of? Because ultimately, it's cheaper to keep your clients for a long enough time than it is to try and continuously acquire new ones. And ultimately, for me, fulfilling on what you do and doing it really well is your best form of marketing. So I actually get all of it full. So I spend a lot of money on revenue generating dollars that then flows into revenue support. I double down on my revenue supporting dollars because my revenue support is my marketing machine long term, because I'm creating a world-class experience for my clients. So understanding what those drivers are and building your business around your desired profit margin, not letting your revenue, your expenses dictate what your margin ends up being, is exactly how you bridge the gap of wealth that's tied up in your business and actually turn this into a business that's an asset, not a job for yourself.
And I can just see why so many small like practices or like, startups or they never get past to that next stage. I mean, I have the multi-passionate chiropreneur. And so I've coached like 50 plus different, like really high level coaching on understanding your growth trajectory for your clinic. And it's crazy to me how many chiropractors have been in practice 10, 15 years. And we started asking some of these numbers about their profit margins and this and that. And they're like, how would I find that out? And I'm like, holy shit. And it's like, it's okay. There's no shame. This is why we're here. But it's like, yeah, so many, like step one is know how the hell your business is making money and what it's doing. Yeah. And okay. So then if you don't master that, you probably don't ever get to that next level where you need this next person. So like,
you shouldn't. It would actually be the worst thing that could ever happen, is that you start to make significantly more money, because it's just going to come crashing down a lot harder if you don't understand the basic foundation. That's what I do a lot of private equity stuff, talk to a lot of private equity guys, and unit level economics are the most important thing. So if it doesn't work on a small scale, it's only going to be worse at a larger scale. So you need to master the economics on a small scale to make sure your business can work first.
Yeah. We personally lived that, that unit economics of like, we got up really big, really high revenue. And then we looked and we're just like, holy shit, we're not making any money. We're not making any money. Like we did not scale appropriately. And so the last 3 years has been like reconstructing from, all right, let's tear this down a little bit and rebuild. So
Sure.
okay, so next person. So besides bookkeeping, what's that next level?
I could go one of two directions. I could say, one, it's yourself, because like you're only going to be able to sustain a level that you're, worthy of being at. And if you don't believe you're worthy of doing so, then there's just no point of getting there. Like you have to be able to personally develop to the point where you truly become the person that is making 9 figures. And you have to step into their, like, it's weird.
So
I'm getting into the quantum side of my life.
I know, but so many people don't actually think they have a worth issue. Like if you took, especially, I mean, you probably know this coming from like a blue collar, like where it's just like, no, you have a money issue. And they're like, no, I don't. I love money. And you're like, you don't think that you're worthy of making that. And they're like, no, I am. And it's like, this is why most people who win the lottery are broke within a certain number of years.
Yep. I would argue that most of us still do, even if we still consciously fix it, because we're constantly trying to get a larger worthiness issue, right? So like I'm constantly just trying to get a larger issue and solve a larger problem for myself. That's the ever evolving side of it. Now, next professional, if I'm going to scale, obviously we're like, you had your bookkeeper. Now we obviously need your tax professional. Definitely getting some type of general business legal person that you can bounce ideas off of, client contracts, making sure that there's someone overseeing like your insurances, especially in the world of chiropractic, your malpractice. All these things are super important to make sure that like no single catastrophic event could ever take you down.
Right.
Then I think once you start to get to a point where, because I only work with business owners in the world of financial advising and consulting and stuff like that. I think too many people, business entrepreneur wise, are too quick to try and hire a financial advisor to invest their money outside of their business when your business is your best performing asset.
Okay,
That's
hold
why
on.
I
Say that
switched my model.
again. Say that again.
When you're an entrepreneur, your business should be your most predictable and best performing asset.
Right.
The dollars I put into my business to grow it should be compounding a lot faster than the market.
Oh, okay. I just understood what you're saying. So instead of starting or continuing to invest dollars back into your business, you're like going and putting it in the stock market.
Everyone's like, oh, I have 100 grand saved up and my business is making $50,000 a month. I need to go, like, instead of sitting on that money, I need to go invest it into the S&P 500 or buy Bitcoin. I need to diversify. There's nothing wrong with any single one asset class, but your business should be your best performing asset. So I'm a huge believer in testing out what your market cap is. If you're in chiropractic and you own the location, how much can you get to a point where like you feel like you've saturated the market and then you rather have to expand,
How do you
or we
figure
can
that out
invest
though?
elsewhere? You just break your system. You find a point where people are saying no, or your marketing's no longer having any reach. And you just constantly keep breaking your system to see if you have the support to do it. And then you hire more people and you keep on testing the market cap.
Okay. That makes sense.
So
So so you would say just keep reinvesting into your business
well,
until you've reached the market cap?
I would first say, like, find out what the best investments in your business are and stack, like, build liquidity up until that point. Because you know, like, a lot of people lie to themselves and say, I don't make profit because I'm constantly reinvesting into the business, but it's not actually helping the business grow year over year. So ultimately, you're just spending money to save money in taxes sometimes, where I see a lot of people doing it.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm a huge believer of is let's continue to stack a bunch of liquidity, because the asymmetric opportunities lie within your business. You just don't know them yet. Maybe it's an opportunity to buy the location that you're renting, or buy
I was going to
another
say, you're saying a
practice.
lot of words together that I don't understand. So you said stack your liquidity. So
So cash, right? Building cash. Now, once we get to a certain point of cash, let's make sure that we're getting the highest yields on our cash. So I'm not a big believer in just like putting every dollar you have into a checking account, but we can build cash alternatives to where I still have the liquidity available when the opportunities come up that are typically in my business, because I control those opportunities.
right.
Whether it's buying that property that's going to be more predictable and I know I can expand, or potentially negotiating a deal to buy out another practice that's, you know, geographically convenient for me to continue growing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an expert in that industry. So why would I invest elsewhere when I know I can double down and everyone else is focusing on shiny object syndrome, trying to beat the returns in the market, when I can just double down while they eventually aren't prepared like this? They might go out of business. I can buy their book of business at a massive discount if I have the cash to do so.
If you're talking to, all right, you're going to hate this question. And I understand if you can't really answer, but you're going to try. You're going to do your best.
I don't care. We're
All
good. Let's
right.
go.
So let's say I've been in practice 5 years. I'm renting. We're doing well. You know, we're bringing in an extra $500,000 a year in profit. Real estate or whole life first?
Oof.
I know.
Great question. Depending on the scenario, let's say everything constant. We're not in a crazy amount of debt and the cash flow is good and we have our business there. Why not both? That's what I do.
Mhm.
If
All
I
right. So what if you
leverage,
don't have the cash flow? Like, what if you have to pick one first? What is the determining factor of whether is it like how well the real estate market is doing, or like?
so I mean, like if you properly structure the whole life contract well, you're
Mhm.
pretty much just turning most of that cash into cash value that's going to
Okay.
perform better for you long term, right? You do sacrifice a little bit of short term liquidity loss, where like anyone that's had a whole life contract, the best of the best still lose a little bit of money in the short term
And when
because you
you're
got to
saying
pay some
short
insurance
term,
costs.
like a year?
Like yeah, a year or two where there's a
Yeah.
little bit of liquidity loss, but you should be 85 to 90% of money available when you put it in if you have a good contract. That means I can now get the money in there, loan it right back out to go buy real estate. For me, what I'm doing personally
Yep.
is as I'm hitting so I'll basically have like safety parameters where my number one safety parameter is 80% of my fixed monthly burn, my fixed monthly expenses, 80% of that has to get covered with the first weeks of recurring revenue. So the first week of my recurring revenue already takes care of pretty much my entire operation for the month. That's a very healthy place to be in because now I can pretty much reallocate my funds however I want to. So now I can scale very efficiently.
Mhm.
So then I build up liquidity parameters that grow each and every month. Myself and my business partner, we have specific liquidity parameters that we can never go below, and we stay very consistent with what we pay each other as well. Because I'm a big proponent in paying yourself. Then above those parameters, I allocate towards cash alternatives. Could be whole life insurance because I built my contract to sustain a very low monthly contribution and large amounts of dump ins that I can do throughout the year, like a bank account.
Right.
Same thing with like my higher yield accounts with like treasury bills and municipal bonds, not financial advice, by the way. And then on the side, since the market, like even though we're in December of 2024 right now, interest rates are coming down and we're expected to consistently come down, but the mortgage rates are actually going up a little bit in the short term. So right now, I'm rather holding on to liquidity or finding opportunities to find seller finance deals where I built teams around the entire country just dedicated to finding me deals where the owner's looking to finance the property so I can negotiate significantly better down payments and
Mhm.
lower interest rates so my cash flow is significantly better. And then down the road when I refinance, I get significantly more cash out of it.
Right. So you're getting those. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I took you into the weeds there on that
You're good.
question. All right. So then final question is not necessarily an easy one either. Is there a point where, like, because you talked about this, too often people are quick to like start putting their profits somewhere else. How does somebody figure out whether they're at a point where they should make this jump and like do something like, because basically what I heard your response to that was like whole life first for 1 or 2 years and then real estate. But then like, is there too early? Is there a point where it is too soon of like, oh, you're pulling money out of your business too soon to do the whole life?
Definitely. Definitely. I would say you need to make sure that your cash flow is stabilized. You shouldn't be doing anything until you feel like you can, I would almost say have at least 6 to 12 months of runway sitting in the bank account, especially when you're in startup mode, because literally anything can happen. Like
Mhm.
I don't want to project another COVID happening and like the entire world shutting down, but you need to create enough safety because if that is your number one asset and that's where you're spending most of your time, we need to make sure that that's working first. And
Mhm.
I'm okay with sacrificing a little bit of short-term opportunity cost by not getting extra percentages by having my money in the market, knowing that I have the cash and the cushion to where if I need to experience downturns or hire new people, maybe I lose an employee and I have to go rehire one fast, etc. I know that's a huge priority for me in the short term.
Right.
Because the way that in my opinion, that you take quantum leaps in entrepreneurship is by doubling down on what you're already good at, not trying to be the best at every single thing. That's what you have professionals for.
Right. I love that.
Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. It does. All right. So you're still podcasting
Yeah, we podcast about 4 times a week.
4 times a week?
So we stacked
That's okay. That
basically.
makes sense because I started in 2019 too. And you were like, you said you had 500 episodes. And I'm like, the fuck? How does that mean?
We basically reverse engineered a way to get our ideal joint venture avatar on the podcast. We've worked with a bunch of agencies that people sign up with them to get them on podcasts, and we're just in their network. So then they send us tons of people. We'll do about 4 every Friday. We basically just stack the calendar.
Yeah.
I would say 6 out of every 10 end up being really amazing relationships and fruitful. So it's just been a great driver of connections for us.
So is that where people should find you? Where can people find more of you? I'm assuming the podcast.
I'm probably the most active on Instagram, which is Antonio Vaglica Jr. LinkedIn, we started posting a lot on there.
How's that going
I
for
post
you?
on
We're just getting
uh,
into the LinkedIn world, and I'm like, God damn it, another network.
yeah, I think LinkedIn, the algorithm's unbelievable, but we haven't cracked it yet. I'm gonna get a lot more into the weeds of how I go about like writing. Well, it's gonna
Mhm.
get me my my creative juices out there. I get very excited about it. So
Yeah.
uh yeah. So I don't know exactly how it's going yet, to
We'll
be
see. We'll see.
quite
All
frank.
right. So
Yeah.
Instagram, LinkedIn, and podcast.
Yeah, the podcast is called the Consistency Wins Podcast.
Well, thank you so much. I see it's getting dark over there in New York in your
Yeah, it's
grandparents.
I mean, I don't know how people that was another reason why I moved to Miami, because how it's impossible to be happy with your life when it's 4:30 p.m. and it's pitch black dark already.
No
So
kidding. No kidding. Seasonal affective depression disorder is a real thing. I'm
it's
in
crazy.
Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So. All right, Antonio, thank you so much. This was awesome. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
All right, She Slayers, until next week. Bye.